Each year, Wikipedia runs a fundraising campaign on their website, displaying banners at the top of them, urging all users to donate for the price of a cup of coffee. These banners make it seem as if Wikipedia, the shrine of free online accessible information, is in dire need of money in order to keep the website running. However, this couldn't be further from the truth, with annual revenues exceeding hundreds of millions of dollars. This is the story of how Wikipedia has lied to you.
Wikipedia
now boasts 5 million articles.
5.7 million articles.
Hundreds of thousands of volunteers. 8 million people use. I wouldn't do this if someone was going to make a profit off it.
Whether it be history, science, politics, literature, it has something for everyone. I use it as my initial ground for any research I do, and so do many others. It's probably the best place to start your research. It gives you an overall summary on topics and citations back to the original text. However, the idea of an encyclopedia containing basic human knowledge is not a new one. In fact, these have existed for hundreds of years, such as England's 18th century Encyclopedia Britannica, or 15th century Germany with the Nuremberg Chronicle. However, the oldest surviving one dates back to the times of ancient Rome. It was written by an early Roman army commander in Como, Italy, Pliny the Elder. The encyclopedia he wrote is basically a summary of a lot of current knowledge at the time. It was divided into 37 volumes, each volume's talking about various topics like agriculture, animals, medicine, even basic human biology. A lot of these having citations back to the original text, just like today's Wikipedia. So, fast forward to the late 90s, the internet becomes an everyday utility. Most households in the Western world have a personal computer and access to the internet.
I'm a student, and I do a lot of research on the web. So what I wanted, what I really had to have, was a powerful desktop computer. Dell built a desktop just for me. This direct way actually costs less.
It was the start of a new age, the age of information. Anyone could share anything to everyone in a matter of seconds. And here come these guys, Jimmy Wales and Larry Sanger. These two guys would come to create one of the most visited websites on internet history. Jimmy Wales, the CEO of Bomis, launched the precursor to the current Wikipedia in late '99, known as Nupedia. He hired Sanger as an editor-in-chief for the website. Nupedia worked just like Wikipedia, with content being made by volunteers. However, in this case, these were scientists, professors, scholars. Some articles could be proposed by the average person, but these would be more suggestions rather than actual articles. All content posted was peer-reviewed through a 7-step process by academics before being published, in many ways similar to how science papers and journals are reviewed today. So, Nupedia is launched. It gains some success with a dozen or so articles published within the first year, but the peer review is lengthy and time-consuming. Sanger is very unimpressed by this effort. Lo and behold, here comes Ben Kovitz, a computer programmer at the time and a friend of Sanger, who proposes to him the idea of a wiki. Wikis are websites in which all content is user-generated, just like Nupedia, but anyone can create, edit, and cite articles. Sanger immediately liked the idea of a wiki and thought this was a great way to increase the productivity and would let them make more articles on a separate website that would then be fed into Nupedia down the normal peer review route and then published there. A week later, the Nupedia wiki is launched, and then shortly after renamed to Wikipedia.
Wikipedia is the best thing ever.
Wikipedia was an instant success. Within the first month of its inception, it garnered over 1,000 articles. 6 months later, 10,000 articles. And within a year, 20,000 articles. However, the clock is ticking. These are the early 2000s. Nasdaq is at an all-time high, rising by over 400% in a few years. Everyone is investing in tech stocks, many of these exploding their share price by thousands of percent in just a few years. All this money is being invested into these companies whilst most of them make a net loss. This causes what we now know as the dot-com bubble to burst.
Is putting your money into internet stocks a rational investment in the technology of the future, or has the sector become an irrational financial bubble that threatens to burst, devastating the wealth of investors?
Stocks are going up for no reason that reflects on their fundamental value.
It's described as nothing short of breathtaking, a points drop never before seen on the US markets. The fragile technology stocks even harder hit. It lost a quarter of its value in just 1 week.
Nobody can disagree that there are no valuation stories now that can give credence to the stock prices of today.
If you poll 75% of the people that buy internet stocks and ask them what they're buying, they have no clue. All they know is that these stocks continue to go higher, and this is the biggest bubble that I think that's ever existed in the financial world.
The company that funded the whole Wikipedia project, Bomis, was also hit very badly, so much so that the editor-in-chief Sanger proposed that Bomis would start running advertisements on the Wikipedia page. However, many editors and contributors were heavily against this, the Spanish Wikipedia especially, who decided to fork the entire source code of the website and establish their own, separate from the original Wikipedia. Scared that the project may fall apart, Bomis decided to not monetize the platform in any way, and Wales, the CEO of Bomis at the time, cut funding to the project, including the salaried editor-in-chief position of Larry Sanger, leading to his resignation. The project was gaining a lot of traction, and in 2006 it reached its first 1 million total articles. It reached a point where it was gaining nearly 2,000 articles per day. It became one of the top 10 visited websites on the internet. Just to demonstrate the sheer size of the amount of articles written in 2015, an artist by the name of Michael Mandelberg decided to print out every single article in volumes consisting of around 700 pages each. It took him 3 years to do this, and in the end he had so much data it took a computer over 3 weeks to output and format these articles so that they could be printed in the first place. And in the end he could only print a fraction of the articles as the entire project was just over ambitious. And this is what he made. 1,980 total volumes, 91 of those just being the table of contents for the volumes. This was just a fraction of the representation, as the entire Wikipedia at that date would need around 7,343 volumes. In the end he only actually printed around 100 of these volumes, and the rest is just an art display on the wall, but you can buy all of the volumes on the print Wikipedia website. That's right, all 7,343 of them. As of the date I'm recording this video, January 2022, Wikipedia has a total of over 6.4 million articles amounting to over 4 billion words total. And that's only the English ones. So anyway, yeah, the project was very successful, however it was not sustainable, as without a way to monetize the platform, it would lose money. So much earlier, in June of 2003, Wales founded the Wikimedia Foundation, a non-profit organisation which would be the new owners of Wikipedia. From that time on, he relied on generous donations and contributions from everyday users to keep the website running. And only a few months later, the servers for Nupedia, the original Wikipedia, crashed and were never recovered. This was the end of the road for Nupedia. The Wikimedia Foundation boasts its not-for-profit status, and on the website mention how they protect the values and policies to allow free knowledge to thrive. They are deemed a non-profit organisation under section 501 subsection C, paragraph 3 of the IRS Internal Revenue Code. This means they are entirely exempt from any taxation. Under Wikimedia, Wikipedia relied on donations to continue to run and maintain the servers and any of the costs the project incurred. Through 2003, up until now, these donations are an option that are always available to users. In 2004, the first financial year of Wikimedia operating, it reported a total of over $70,000 in contributions by users. A year later, nearly $300,000, and the year after, over $1.3 million. It also started receiving grants from other big tech companies, charities and foundations, one of these totaling to over $9 million by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation and $6 million by the Stanton Foundation.
We happy? Yeah, we happy.
Things were looking very good for Wikipedia. In fact, year by year it has made a larger profit without fail. In 2020, bringing in a whopping $120 million in donations and contributions alone. Despite this overall success in funding, in January of 2016, Wikimedia announced the Wikipedia Endowment, its goal to raise $100 million to, quote, serve as a perpetual source of support for the operation and activities of Wikipedia and its sister projects, end quote.
You've looked online at Wikipedia lately. You can't have failed to have seen the yellow banner. Wikipedia is on a fundraising drive. Donations help keep the world's temple for the mind operational and advert-free.
Throughout the years, Wikipedia displayed these very worrying banners at the top of their website, urging users to donate to, quote, defend Wikipedia's independence, and that these donations would allow Wikipedia to keep thriving, quite often stating that only tiny amounts of people give, around 2 or 1% of people, failing to mention that those 2% of donations being over 8 million people, totaling to over $153 million in 2021. There is no inherent issue with asking for money. In fact, there is nothing wrong with it, especially when you offer such an amazing service at no cost to the user. The only issue here is the apparent misleading of the reader, as if Wikipedia is on the brink of collapse. Many of these banners being very obtrusive and urgent sounding, even if the overall financial situation at Wikipedia could not be better.
You smell that? What is that?
What?
What's that smell?
The cologne?
Money.
Oh, okay.
I smell money.
Okay.
In September of 2021, Wikimedia announced that the endowment goal has now been reached, completing their $100 million goal in half the time they originally planned. And in December that year, still displaying these donation banners. Wikipedia has an internal forum known as the Meta Wikipedia. This is mainly used by the community, involving long-time editors, admins, and everyday users of Wikipedia. You can make an account right now. Recently, there has been a debate criticizing the Foundation's method of fundraising. A lot of users and long-time editors pointing out how deceiving and intrusive these banners appear. Some users calling it absolutely unacceptable, emotional blackmail, and being absolutely disgusted how deceptive these campaigns are. In order to understand the real issue here, it's not only about how much money Wikipedia makes, it's about how this money is used and handled by Wikipedia. In 2021, Wikimedia reported a net revenue from donations and contributions alone of $153 million. That's just shy of $33 million more from the previous year. This increase in their revenue was also reflected in their expenses, especially in their salaries and wages, which increased by over $12 million in a single year. In 2019, Wikimedia reported to have 291 permanent employees, their salaries totaling to over $55 million for that year. That's an average of nearly $200,000 per employee. Out of a few fairly reliable websites I've looked at, most non-profits pay an average of around $60,000 to any executive director they may have. Although this number is very hard to ascertain due to the big differences in sizes of non-profits, it's still an average baseline. The executive director of Wikimedia was paid a salary of $75,000 in 2007. Sue Gardner was only just promoted to the position in December that year, whilst being a management consultant for 6 months prior. The following year, she was paid just under $170,000. The last available salary for the executive director position is Catherine Maher, in 2019 making nearly $400,000. However, it's not just the executive director who's making so much money. In fact, all the directors and chiefs of departments raking in anywhere between $200,000 and $300,000 in recent years. These salaries also do not include any bonuses and compensation that may have been given, a lot of these amounting to over $30,000. The official IRS guidelines state that compensation for directors within charities and non-profits should be reasonable compensation for services rendered. My guess for what reasonable compensation might be is as good as yours. Many of these salaries are comparable to directors in multi-trillion-dollar for-profit companies such as Google and Amazon. So what's the difference? Shouldn't directors between different companies be paid similar amounts as they occupy similar roles? Well, yes, but no. Google and Amazon are publicly traded companies. They have investor surplus and money to make. Often the purpose of these director roles are to increase efficiency and profits within their business. That's what they're paid for after all. However, Wikimedia is a non-profit organization. It is exempt from any sort of tax, and making money is not supposed to be the sole goal. In fact, you could also argue that Wikimedia does not require any sort of management at all. In a TED Talk by Jimmy Wales, one of the original founders back in 2007, which was also the peak of Wikipedia popularity, he said himself,
"So the servers are managed by a ragtag band of volunteers, all the editing is done by volunteers, and everything is managed by the volunteers, and the total monthly cost for our bandwidth is about $5,000, and that's essentially our main cost."
All content on Wikipedia is created by unpaid volunteers, tens of thousands of them. Regarding the running costs of Wikipedia, in 2013, Eric Moeller, the Vice President of Engineering and Product Development at the time, stated that WMF, the Wikimedia Foundation, has operated in the past without staffing, and that the minimal annual operating expenses to be more in the order of magnitude of $10 million a year to ensure not only bare survival, but actual sustainability of Wikimedia's mission. He also did voice his support for an endowment style of funding. However, the expenses do not outweigh the revenue. 4 years into launching the endowment, Wikimedia has increased its net assets by double, from 91 million to 180 million in 2020. And this number is not slowing down, last year gaining nearly 51 million in net assets. An important note to take away from this too is that the net assets listed here do not include the endowment at all either, which totals to at least 100 million. Despite this mass success in funding and increase in yearly donations, Wikimedia has not scaled back its fundraising efforts at all, still displaying distressing messages to users, still potentially misleading millions of donors, and still increasing their revenue. In March of 2021, Wikimedia also announced the Wikimedia Enterprise API. The purpose of this is to allow Wikimedia to monetize content on Wikipedia by essentially providing an easier way to connect information from Wikipedia to services such as Amazon's Alexa or Google's Voice Assistant. However, this service is completely opt-in and is not planned to be an income substitute for the current fundraising process. Personally, I feel like the issue here is not with why Wikimedia wants to make money, but rather how it does this. On the surface, I fully support Wikimedia's idea of a free encyclopedia available for all, and raising money by fundraising is a good way to do this, allowing people to have the choice to fund such a project. No one is forced to do so, whilst also keeping the whole project rather impartial, funded by the community, for the community. However, the fundraising efforts of Wikipedia are not saying the full truth of the matter, and how I've previously stated, are rather misleading, many believing that Wikipedia is on the brink of collapse. With yearly donations exceeding hundreds of millions, Wikipedia definitely has enough money to upkeep the project, considering that less than 1% of that is actually being spent on internet hosting annually. With such numbers and an endowment to top it all off, Wikipedia is in a very good position. In fact, if everyone stopped donating to Wikipedia, it could thrive for years to come. That's the initial purpose of the endowment, a permanent fund that helps protect Wikipedia and Wikimedia projects in times of uncertainty. However, the purpose of this video isn't here to vilify Wikimedia either. In their 2022 annual plan, Wikimedia announced an increase of 95% funding to their Thriving Movement platform, which aims to give out grants to numerous projects allowing Wikipedia itself to be more accessible to more communities, which can only be a good thing. I think the question here is more of a moral one. Will Wikipedia tone down their fundraising efforts now that their endowment goal has been reached? If the Wikimedia Enterprise API is successful, will that become their primary source of additional income on top of the endowment to upkeep the project? If the revenue from donations was reduced, perhaps Wikimedia could manage their funds in a better way. Or will Wikimedia just continue to manage the project like it have for the last decade? After all, only time will tell.
Screw it.